Mongabay Reports is a series that shares evergreen articles from Mongabay.com, read by myself, Mike DiGirolamo. This episode's feature article is A Hidden Crisis in Indonesia's Palm Oil Sector, 6 Takeaways from Our Investigation, by Mongabay, the Gecko Project, and BBC News on the 31st of May, 2022. Recently, Mongabay, BBC News, and the Gecko Project released a joint investigation into a scheme that was intended to help lift millions of Indonesians out of poverty and cut them in on the spoils of the global palm oil boom, but has instead been plagued by allegations of exploitation and illegality. Indonesia produces millions of tons of palm oil each year, much of it destined for supermarket shelves in Europe and the US, where it goes into everything from frozen pizza to laundry detergent. When the industry began to take off in Indonesia in the 1970s, communities were supposed to benefit by getting a share of large-scale plantations, a portion known as plasma. Initially, the government encouraged and incentivized this through policies, and it became routine for companies to promise villagers a share of their plantation, sometimes as much as 80%. From 2007, it became a legal requirement for companies to share a fifth of any new plantation with communities. In our field reporting on the palm oil industry in recent years, we frequently came across allegations that companies had failed to meet both promises and legal obligations, but there had been no systematic attempt to find out how big this problem was or what impact it was having on communities. We set out to fill that void. Here are 6 takeaways from the investigation. Number 1, communities are likely being deprived of hundreds of millions of dollars every year. Our analysis of government data suggests companies have failed to provide hundreds of thousands of hectares of legally required plasma to Indonesian communities, costing them hundreds of millions of dollars each year in lost profits. In central Kalimantan province alone, we estimated villagers are collectively losing more than $90 million each year. Number 2, disputes over plasma pervade the industry and have become a major source of unrest. Over the past decade, at least 155 palm oil companies have been accused of failing to provide plasma, according to a database we compiled of local media articles, academic papers, NGO reports, and other publicly available sources. These include subsidiaries of almost every major palm oil conglomerate operating in the Southeast Asian country. As a result, dozens, if not hundreds, of rural communities have turned to protest or other forms of direct action, marching in the streets, massing outside government offices, blockading roads, and occupying plantations. These incidents have taken place at a rate of more than 1 a month over the past 5 years. Many villagers involved in such actions have faced violence at the hands of police or been sentenced to prison time. Number 3, government intervention in plasma disputes have been limited and mostly ineffective. Regional government approaches to resolving plasma disputes have tended toward informal mediation between companies and communities, but research suggests this typically fails, a conclusion backed by our investigation. While public officials sometimes threaten punitive action against companies over plasma disputes, very rarely do they follow through, we found, allowing conflicts to fester for years or even decades. Number 4, an audit by Jakarta appears to have made little progress on plasma. In 2018, President Joko Widodo launched a national audit of the palm oil industry. Among other things, it was supposed to check whether companies were complying with plasma regulations and, where necessary, accelerate the provision of small holdings. 4 years on, however, the administration appears to have made little progress, and it remains unclear whether the review has led to any action on plasma. We are still collecting comprehensive information on plasma, Surya Chandra, Deputy Minister of the National Land Agency, which is coordinating the audit, told us. There really isn't much. Number 5, Indonesia's largest palm oil producer has failed to provide legally required plasma in several plantations. While Golden Agri Resources has stated publicly that almost 21% of its total planted area is plasma, the reality is more complex. The conglomerate's plasma, we found, is disproportionately concentrated in just 5 of its 54 subsidiaries. These are older plantations dating back to the 1990s and early 2000s, when it was not uncommon for companies to allocate 70% of their plantations as plasma. Golden Agri has acknowledged publicly or in response to our questions that it has yet to provide all of the plasma required by law in 8 subsidiaries. Even where it has provided plasma, we found, some communities have had to wait well over a decade for the small holdings to materialize. In response to our findings, the company said it is committed to complying with plasma regulations and that this is a work in progress. Number 6. Palm oil tainted by plasma disputes is flowing into the supply chains of major brands. While many of the world's largest consumer goods firms have promised to root out deforestation, land grabbing, labor abuses, and exploitation from their palm oil supply chains, they appear to have a blind spot when it comes to plasma. We found that more than a dozen such companies, including Nestle, Kellogg's, Unilever, Johnson & Johnson, and PepsiCo, have sourced palm oil from producers alleged to have withheld plasma or the profits from plasma from Indonesian communities over the past 8 years. All of these companies have sourced palm oil, according to their most recent disclosures, from a Golden Agri plantation that has failed to provide plasma for more than 13 years, despite being required to as a condition of its license. In response to a summary of our findings, the buyers pointed to their existing policies aimed at protecting human rights and eliminating exploitation from their supply chains. Some noted that they required their suppliers to comply with the law. They said they engage with their suppliers when potential violations of these policies are brought to their attention, and would do so for the cases identified in our article. For a complete list of their responses, visit the page linked in the show notes of this podcast. Read the full investigation, The Promise Was a Lie, How Indonesian Villagers Were Cut Out of the Palm Oil Boom, by clicking on the link in the show notes. This has been a special Mongabay audio report, original article by Mongabay, the Gecko Project, and BBC News. I am your reader, Mike DiGirolamo. Special projects like this are made possible by our Patreon supporters. Please consider becoming a monthly sponsor via our Patreon page at patreon.com/Mongabay. Just $1 per month will help us offset the production costs and hosting fees, and help us make more content like this. Keep up with all of Mongabay's news from Nature's Frontline at mongabay.com. Get updates from Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram, where our handle is @Mongabay. Thanks for listening.